Prologue. As I returned to my apartment that evening, it felt like the last few months of my life had been wasted. I wasn't sure what to expect anymore. We were attempting what might be the most important experiment in history, trying to break the fundamental rules of a universe. Without any immediate feedback, failure seemed like the only option. Before we conducted the experiment, I was so confident it would work. Every test leading up to that moment had paved a road that seemed to lead clearly to success. My perception of reality was shaken the moment I first learned about this project. At first, I thought it was a joke, a crazy idea from a sci-fi story. It would never achieve anything meaningful. Yet, over time, that doubt transformed into a realization maybe there really was something far greater than I could have ever imagined. Now, as I sat on my couch in my apartment and poured a Guinness into a glass, my gut sank. Somehow, it really had just been a big trick. It was as though I had pulled the wool away from my eyes, only to find out the wool was supposed to be there. I turned on the TV and started cycling through the channels. As I finished 2 more beers, finding myself in a much better mood than before, I broke out my laptop and started Googling classified information. If the experiment had failed, why did it matter if I exposed some lies across the World Wide Web, while trying to find some justification for the last 6 months of my life? I found lots of weird stories about people claiming they traveled through time or had special powers. With each story, I found myself wanting to believe they were real. I was starting to feel like my grasp of reality was slipping. It could have been the 3 beers, or maybe it was just that I hadn't gotten much sleep in the last month while preparing for the final experiment, but my mind was running at partial capacity. As my mood started to turn sour again, and I was ready to give up for the night, I came across a blog that made me want to throw up. It started off similar to a lot of the other garbage I had seen. If you're reading this, then some condition must be true. Most of the previous websites and blogs mentioned that the writers had successfully traveled through time or teleported to some crazy place. However, this one said the experiment was a success. That night, I entered a rabbit hole and quickly found that perhaps the rabbit hole was deep and dark, but there was an end. The following posts are what I found. At first, I was unsure if it was some sick joke, but the details made it undeniable that somewhere, somehow, someone or something knew my entire story. Post 1. Who am I? For now, I'm going to call myself John Smith. Before I open Pandora's box, here's a summary of my background. Once you know how I got to where I am, hopefully the puzzle pieces will start to fall into place. After college, I joined the Navy. I trained and ultimately became what they call a naval flight officer. We focus on the mission success of the aircraft we are assigned to, planning sensor usage and weapon implementation. I was assigned to fly the P-3s out of Jacksonville, Florida. I helped prevent drugs from entering the country and flew off the coast of foreign countries, ensuring freedom of navigation. Typical peacetime stuff. Following my first tour flying these operational missions, I was sent to a test squadron in Patuxent River, Maryland, or Pax River. Around the same time, I completed a second bachelor's degree in computer science. This is where I found myself in the right place at the right time, or perhaps the wrong place at the wrong time, depending on whether you believe ignorance is bliss. We were testing out a new weapon release system on a detachment, or trip, to a weapon range in California, assessing the accuracy of the weapon placement. Think maritime mines or dumb bombs that can't guide themselves. As a senior lieutenant, I was in charge of the tests and served as the officer in charge during the detachment. It was supposed to be what we call a good deal trip, low stress, and a good time for everyone. The aircrew and the maintenance team had all completed multiple tours and were far from the 18-year-olds fresh out of high school. We had already conducted a series of tests at a local range in Maryland, but wanted to validate those results with further testing. On the morning of the testing, we held an informal briefing at the hotel, outlining how the day was supposed to go. My testing team and I departed for the range in our sweet rental minivan, while the aircrews and maintainers headed to the airfield to prep the aircraft. That day went as expected. 2 full combat crews each flew 2 flights, with a reload and refuel in between. On each flight, they dropped 8 2,000-pound shapes, essentially concrete replicas of actual weapons. We measured every point and the accuracy exceeded expectations, even outperforming previous testing iterations. The next day, however, did not go well. Overnight, another unit had been conducting live weapons training near our test site. They were using actual explosives, not just the concrete shapes like us. When we arrived at the range, everything was off. All of our gear was missing, and any evidence that we had conducted testing the day before was non-existent. It was the weirdest thing. All 32 shapes we dropped were gone, completely vanished. Remember, these were 2,000 pounds each. Our target was gone, and the box of measurement equipment was moved 200 to 300 yards from where anyone recalled leaving it. We called the weapon range duty officer to report the situation. They had a procedure for incidents like this. Apparently, it wasn't unusual for strange, unexplainable things to happen at the range. They told us to sit tight while they contacted Naval Criminal Investigation Service, or NCIS. Once NCIS was notified, we were informed that they were on their way. We also let the air crews know that we were canceling the flights for the day. Much to their delight, they probably started planning evening festivities. In the distance, we spotted a cloud of dust rising off the road as a vehicle approached. When it finally pulled up, a black SUV, 2 people stepped out. The first was Agent Walker, who introduced himself to us. He then turned to the other person, a government scientist named Alan. We explained that someone appeared to have tampered with our test site and equipment. As the details became clear, Agent Walker seemed increasingly uninterested, idly kicking small rocks in the dirt. It was obvious he was primarily there to escort Alan. Alan, on the other hand, began asking a series of strange questions. His line of questioning made me exchange a sideways look with Agent Walker. I remember Walker's response vividly. Dude, don't think too much about it. Ignorance is definitely fucking bliss here. In that moment, I realized my world was about to change in ways I couldn't yet comprehend.